Welcome to the Mime Radio Show podcast. I'm Karen Hoyer.
And I'm James Donlin. Season 3. So many great voices up to this point, and we're ready for another one today.
Who is it, James?
Who is it? Yeah, well, I'm a little foggy today. It's a cold weather outside. I know you're in Chicago. I'm in Ashland, Oregon, and the cold is banging around inside my head. So let me read to you about Leland Faulkner, a prolific artist. Leland Faulkner is always searching for the joy, magic, and fun in theater. His 30-year career is crafted from the mime's physicality, the actor's imagination, and the magician's love of illusion. He has worked with storytellers, actors, opera singers, magicians, clowns, mimes, musicians, universities, and theater companies to develop a wide range of original productions, touring to international theater and circus festivals in Hong Kong, Russia, China, Canada, the US, and Japan. He is the former owner and director of the Celebration Barn Theater. Leland is also an award-winning filmmaker and digital media producer. As a young theater artist, he apprenticed with master mime artist Tony Montanaro and became his touring partner for 3 years. Another of his mentors was the world-famous and revered magician John Calvert, whom he performed with in Las Vegas and New York City. He continues to develop new work, most notably Walker Between Worlds and Dreamcatcher, Native American story-based performances that have received accolades. So with that, let us welcome the prolific Leland Faulkner.
Yay, bravo.
Hi.
Welcome, Leland. We're so glad that you joined us today. And
Thank you, Karen.
I've been watching a lot of your videos and looking at your photos, and I'm so excited about your work. I have never gotten a chance to see you live, but so wonderful that you could join us today.
Well, thanks. I love the fact you guys are doing something historical about mime.
And
Yeah,
where are you coming from right now, Leland?
I'm
Where
in
are you?
Auburn, Maine, right on
Maine.
near a lake here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Your work is so eclectic, drawing from so many different sources. But I would say that probably at the core of it is the mime training and the mime artistry that we're going to talk about today. It's really great to have you, Leland. I've seen your work, and I'm really appreciative of it and inspired by it. And you have a lot to say, and we're ready to hear it.
It's always funny coming from a mime that they have a lot to say, right?
Well, that's
the
true.
Mime radio show.
That's it.
So Leland, I know that you've performed for all sorts of different audiences, and in particular, you've done a lot of school shows, touring in the schools and performing for kids. And so touring, going to all sorts of different countries. What we're curious about, and our first question is always, as an artist, when you're about to go out on stage, what do you do to prepare before you start the show? What's your thought or your process right before you step on stage?
It's something that I learned from Tony. Because he said, when we go out, just imagine that they're all standing up for you because they love you.
Oh, how lovely. Oh.
And so I do that. And and part of that, is like this love affair with the audience that you want to have. And you want them to like you. You want them to be in love with you by the end of the program. And if you have to visualize that, you have to premise that and make that atmosphere happen. And if you don't do it internally, how are you going to make it physical?
Mm-hmm.
How do you is this the thought you have like within the first 10 seconds the last 10 seconds before you step on stage, or do you build up to this concept?
Right there.
You have a ritual that you do for however long before you prepare for or present your performance.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard to sustain thinking of them standing up for you for an hour before you prepare. But but just before you go on, it's like this little snap of consciousness where you know that this whole byplay and this whole relationship is going to happen for the next 45 minutes to an hour, sometimes an hour and a half. And you want that You want that premise.
Now,
So you start with the idea that the audience is your friends. They're your friends.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
That's
beautiful.
right. Not your adversary. You know, you're not out there to kill them.
I think you might have answered my question. So I was going to ask you, what does that body of humanity in front of you, whether they're young or old, represent to you? You know, we mentioned friends, we mentioned people that you want to spend a quality time with. Do you have any particular philosophical thought about who that audience is, who they represent, and so forth?
Well, they represent life itself. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. After working in film and television for many years, you know, you create something in film and television and it's put on the shelf and it's like over there and there's no immediacy. And with a live audience, it's completely immediate. And it's like a living force. Mm-hmm. And it's a group force. It's like a community consciousness. And it's hard to explain, but there's something incredibly magical about that as compared to when you make a film or you do a video or you do something that's digitally interpreted. Mm-hmm. You can hear the breath. You can kind of sense the heartbeat of the crowd or the group.
So tell us a little bit about how you got started, and was that what you were looking for? You were looking for that connection, that's what drew you in to do this type of performing?
It's interesting. When I was 13, I knew I wanted to be an actor. Uh-huh. Right? And I think, well, first of all, I felt at home when I was, a shepherd in the Christmas play. And I still have that same feeling of being, I'm in the place where I belong. I'm home, you know.
My first memory of being in theater is holding the cape of one of the three kings in a church passion play, you know, like or doing the prodigal son and so forth. You know,
I once played Jesus.
Yes, and you know, it's so interesting because you know, growing up in Africa, my mother was a very staunch Catholic, and there was no Catholic church, so we went to this the English version. That was the closest thing we could find, the Church of England. And they had this big cathedral, St. Peter's there in Dar es Salaam. And they had built, now this is something incredible when you think about it. They had built this super modern piece of architecture in the 60s. And you can imagine, this is a church. Mm-hmm. It was all open lattice work. And there was no air conditioning, of course. And this is in equatorial Africa. And so it was all open fretwork, concrete, right? Open fretwork, and roof that went like this, about 4 stories high. And they had excavated a whole area when they were building the church. And in this area of excavation, they built a little theater.
Wow. And
all of the expats would put on plays there. They would do Annie, Get Your Gun, and you know, stuff like that. And they were all Brits for the most part. And they would do musicals, and we would go see the musicals there, and I loved it. And you know, and being an altar boy at the time was also a nice introduction to being in front of the crowd. You know, you had to wake them up with your little bell every once in a while. And I have some other wonderful memories about being an altar boy, but maybe that's for another time.
So you're up
by the bell into the air and all kinds of stuff.
Your upbringing is so eclectic. I mean, your performance is so eclectic, and you draw from so many different areas. So I understand your childhood was spent in some very interesting places. Can you maybe talk about how the environments, like the one you just described, informed your formation as your development as an artist? You know, where you came from, what did you see? Because your work is very far-ranging in terms of where it draws from.
Yeah, it sort of revolves around, I guess, finding your sense of identity. Mm-hmm. And when I was working with Tony in the early years, when I was like 16, 17 years old, and I had never studied mime before, and we were trying to do things, or I was trying to do things, and create things. It was very difficult to even come up with an idea of what to do. It was like a wasteland. What should I do? Everybody's going to do something on Tuesday, and I've got to. And I did this terrible pantomime. I did a hunter who sees a bird, shoots it, goes over and gets it, and the bird dies in his hand. And I looked up at the audience with the most pathetic face I could conjure. That was my pantomime.
Yeah.
And Tony came forward and he goes, all right, so that's the perfect example of a dilettante.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Dun, dun, dun. Well, here's the thing. I didn't know what the word dilettante even meant. I had to go look it up. A dabbler in the arts. I'll never be a dabbler. I'll never be a dabbler. Right? But the other thing that Tony said to me in the critique was, he said, you just don't know enough yet. You need more edges. Mm. And then later in my career, I also had another little dry spot. And it was hard for me to come up with the next thing I wanted to do. And I said, well, you got to draw on yourself. And so I started just to draw on characters like Nasruddin, who was maybe one of the first characters my parents had ever sort of introduced me to, that was from Afghanistan and Turkey and that whole area. Nasruddin is a well-known wise fool. And my parents, especially my father, just loved the Nasruddin stories. And so I was able to write and create my own Nasruddin story, illustrating it with mime and magic and storytelling, all the things that I do. And I've been able to do that with a lot of my personal history. I've done stories from Africa. I've done, of course, the Nasruddin work, and now most recently, my Native American story theater show. And it's interesting, it's taken me this long, to this point in my career, to the pandemic, mm-hmm. to decide to reach into my heritage and make it come alive. And
yeah, isn't that interesting that it takes us, I have some of the same process going on with me. It takes a lifetime to finally understand who you are. Mm-hmm. Like art is such a transitory and such an evolving form. And, I'm curious who your parents were and how you ended up in these places like Afghanistan and Africa, and yeah. your reference to the Native American heritage, that's such a, it takes a lifetime sometimes to reject some of the channels that society puts one in, because we're kind of brainwashed when we're kids in a sense, and how long does it take before we start to discover the things you're talking about?
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your family.
Say that again, Karen. I didn't.
No. I just wanted you to tell us about your family and your travels and how it all happened.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I had 3 older sisters, one of which has passed away, and they were all born in the States. Mm-hmm. My mom and dad. My mother is from the Bad River Band of Chippewa, and I'm a member of that tribe. And my father was a Shoshone Bannock from the Fort Hall Indian tribe, from the Shoshone Bannock tribe on the Fort Hall Indian.
Is Fort Hall, Kansas, or someplace like that?
Fort Hall, Idaho, outside of Pocatello.
That far west, yeah.
Yeah. And so he was the first tribal member to get his college degree, and he went to work for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Mm-hmm. And so there he met my mother at the Bureau of Indian Affairs. and
that little mime wine. I'm starting.
Oh, mime wine too.
There we go.
Indian affairs. That's good.
Starting early.
and so working at the bureau for him, he told me, was like, well, it's springtime. We're going to do this. This is our plan. We're going to try and execute this thing and make that happen. And then they went into summertime. And I said, well, we got to get this done. We got to get these things done. And in the fall, they go, well, we didn't accomplish all the things. And in the winter, I said, well, we got to get back to planning. And it was a cycle like that for 4 years, he said, where things just, they evolved into nothing. And they stayed the same. And it frustrated him. He wanted to make a difference. So he applied to foreign service and worked in foreign service for 30 years. He first worked in India without the family, on his own. My sisters were being born at different times along this journey, and then finally, my 3 sisters and the family moved to Afghanistan with my mom. And you got to realize what it was like in Afghanistan. This was in the Helmand Valley, which is now one of the most violent and war-torn places in the world.
And what years would these have been? What period of time?
This was 57, 58.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it really was a tribal, very different place, you know. I mean, some things never change, but I can imagine. Yeah,
and very tribal, and interesting philosophical attitude towards Western thinking too. I'll talk about that maybe later if you remind me. And so
I'll write that down.
He was in. Were we in?
You were telling me about your family
Kabul.
moving to Afghanistan.
Yeah, my father. I think we were living in Kabul.
Okay.
I think in Kabul. I can't remember exactly. I was just born. And we had a little enclave of Americans there. I think there were 2 other American families. Prior to that, there had been a big American construction company that had come in to create a dam, which is still there, still supplying power to Afghanistan. I was born there. This man, Dr. Bailey, assisted at my birth, and
wow, you know the doctor's name.
Yeah, I do. I was madly in love with his daughter when they came to visit when I was 13.
That's why you remember.
And her name was Sunshine. I mean, oh my God. And anyway, the here's a little side story. So my father told me that one night there came a banging on the door, and he went and answered it. And there was this very official guy in a uniform who had shown up from the dam project, an Afghan, and he said, "We need someone to come and help. And we've been told that you're the person to talk to because you understand English and you can help us." So I don't know anything about this. Just come. So he went, and there was some malfunction, and they've got this huge panel, right? And he sees this button that says reset, and he goes, everybody goes, whoa. Oh, and they gave him a badge. Engineer.
Wow, that's simple.
You're such a great storyteller, Leland.
Yeah.
And it's so cool, the idea that you draw on your family, your history, your heritage. I thought A Walker Between the Worlds was a beautiful piece. And it's interesting to me that you said that it was really the pandemic that sort of caused you to have the time to really dig deep and create that piece? That's really interesting to me.
Yeah, it was an identity crisis, I guess. You know, my wife had a stroke 2.5 years ago, which completely upended my life,
Oh my.
and I became her primary caregiver, and it became very difficult to tour at all. So in one way, the pandemic was a gift because suddenly I was getting offers to give virtual performances and perform like for the Marsh Theater and also for schools and a variety of different things.
Talk to us about the Celebration Barn Theater, because that seems to have been a very important part of your experience. And then what, it's such a name, it's such a place that is so important to so many people in the physical theater world. And you were integral to its identity at different points in time.
I think I'm responsible for keeping it extant. I was like the bridge to where it is now.
And maybe we should say before we go into it that the Celebration Barn is this wonderful space that has created these sort of intensive retreats for artists to go and learn from master teachers and to create work. And it has a very long history of these summertime retreats that many of the people in our audience will have studied there.
Yeah. And when I first went to the barn, it was just Tony's personal space where he taught and no one else. And when I bought it,
You literally bought it. You literally, signed the...
Yes, I bought it. Yep.
Yeah.
With a business partner, Carol Brett.
Wow.
And the corporation that the name that we bought it under was called Foolish Enterprises. And anyway, the roster, the international roster of master teachers happened because I wanted to give students, if they came and took every workshop through the summer, they would get a complete survey of the essential foundations required to create theater. They had studied voice as well as movement. They had studied commedia dell'arte. They had studied neutral mask. They would study Japanese Kyogen theater. They would get this incredible ground, this incredible base on which to build their theater with experiences that they probably wouldn't be able to get anywhere else back to back like that. And so that was the vision, and it was really pretty powerful stuff. The workshop masters were just mind-boggling and amazing. And Barry Rolfe and Andrew Subaki, the Roy Hart Theater from France, just some astounding people were on the roster in those years. And
it's interesting. I've talked to some other people about this on the Mime Radio Show and otherwise. Like I started around 1969, 1970, and at that time there was a mysterious division between East Coast and West Coast of the United States. A lot of artists in the West never associated with artists in the East, and vice versa. And
the hip hop wars.
But we always heard about Celebration Barn, but it was just sort of a place. And I'm wondering, how did you feel that in your past, that there was this kind of division of identity? Because I certainly felt it. And, the Big Mime Festival in 1974 was one of the first, maybe the first time when artists from different parts of the country in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and Barry Rolfe was one of the producers of that, the first time the groups came together, as well as very exciting artists from Europe and Mamiko from Japan. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering if that was something that you were aware of, or, in passing.
I did sense it.
Yeah.
But personally, I'm a walker between worlds. So, I went to dell'arte and I studied with Carlo Mazzoni Clemente, who was, Tony Montanaro and Carlo, they worked together, for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And actually, that's how this whole illusion was created, in an improvisation, between Tony and Carlo.
Hi.
And Tony was miming being in a barrel, and Carlo goes, "Do that again." And suddenly,
Excellent.
then after that, it evolved and entered the lexicon of cliches.
Of
But,
course. So it must also.
Let me just say, Karen, let me just make a point. So this word cliche, something we need to talk about later, like, because we've all done this. I even saw you do it in the Escape, like, I'm just saying, what does that really mean? And maybe there's some kind of something below the surface that has more depth than what we're talking about, but we'll come back to that, because that's one of the issues with mime, and one of the challenges of being a mime in our society is how to bring resonance to that kind of idea. Go ahead, Karen. Yeah.
I was just curious, because it seems like as a teacher myself, I imagine teaching at Celebration Barn was really satisfying too, because you have all these students that are eager to learn. Do you yourself teach?
Yes, I do. In fact, I'm still teaching. I run a monthly workshop called the Kinetic Connection, virtually, but we're thinking about now having the very first in-person event, but it's still kind of iffy. The pandemic is still having its effects, so we're slowly working towards making that become an in-person event. But I've had a very loyal base of students and participants, and a wide variety of disciplines too, showing up for the Kinetic Connection. It is primarily, the Kinetic Connection, I teach essentially vocabulary, movement vocabulary, everything from Decru to the pantomime, illusions to Delsarte. And I'd love to talk about Delsarte here at some point too.
Go ahead.
Delsarte's one of my favorite subjects.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Okay. Delsarte wanted to be an opera singer. He was a genius with music. He was, as a little boy, he was playing in the sand, and as this band paraded past, and a man walked by and said, "What's that?" He goes, "Oh, that's the music they were playing." The man looked at the squiggles in the sand and he said, "Show me." And the kid duplicated the music. And this guy was one of the biggest music teachers in Paris at the time, and took this little street kid. Oh, we just lost power.
Whoa. Oh. What happened?
Windstorm, I think.
Oh, did the power go out?
We had a problem with the natural catastrophe. And we're back.
The windstorm.
Leland, are you all right?
Good Lord.
Oh gosh, I need a little.
Need a little. Oh. Better now. Yeah.
All right, we're good. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. That was a natural catastrophe.
More wind! More wind!
Nice.
There was an actual windstorm.
Nice.
Oh, so what?
Delsarte. I don't think Delsarte could have done that, right?
No.
So we were talking about Delsarte.
No.
Tell us some more about what Delsarte is and what that technique is, and why you like to teach it so much.
Right. Well, Delsarte was a genius from a young age with music. He wanted to be an opera singer, and he went to, and any of us who have studied theater or art can all relate to this. He went to one school and they said, "Well, this is how you do it." Mm. And it didn't work for him. So he went to a different school. They said, "No, this is how you sing." And it didn't work for him. He went to the Beaux-Arts school and they said, "This is how you do it." And eventually his voice was ruined. And so his dream of having a career as a singer, gone, vapored. Yet, in his old age, his doddering old age, singing for some of the biggest theater critics and societies in France at the time. In his old age, he brought everybody to tears when he sang, even though his voice was aged and cracked. And it was because of the power of his gesture, the power of sourcing his voice in different parts of his body through this whole method and approach that he had created. Because of that ability, he was able to move their hearts. So the way it came about was that he took a job outside the world of music at a hospital for the terminally ill, and he would. When he was first told to go down to the morgue to get something and do something, he was disgusted. He couldn't look at the dead bodies. It was a huge struggle for him. But eventually he said, and this was written up, I believe, by Genevieve Stebbins in the Delsarte System of Oratory. Eventually, he said he became like one of the doctors, and he got that sort of clinical ability to see things without having an emotional reaction, and like a scientist. And what he did, what put him on this path of gesture and movement, was observing that the patients, as they gave up their will to live, their thumbs would retract into the palms of their hands. And so in death, they were like this. And he was down in the morgue, and he was looking at all of the bodies, and they were like this, with the thumbs. And so he came up with this postulation that maybe the thumb is like this thermometer. It's a thermometer of vitality. And so to test his theory, he took a newspaper and he cut holes in the photogravure of the newspaper, right? So that nobody would know he was observing them, right? And he saw that the nursemaids for the children and the mothers treated their children differently. The nursemaids would pick the child up and put it on their hip like this. But when the mother came, the mother would extend her thumbs, reach out for the child, and pull the child to her heart. And he goes, a thumb is like an expression of vitality. And when you think about it, it's quite true. You know, when you go to defend yourself, for example, like, you know, you protect the thumb. The thumb is like the biggest yeah or the biggest nay. Some instances, you know, it's life and death.
Or the mob will break your thumbs, correct?
Yeah, to destroy your vitality, to destroy your vita, your yeah, it's like such an important gestural element. And that got him, he was a Christian, but he also, you know, a lot of the different religions use the concept of a trinity in many different ways. And what he did is he broke the body down into these trinities of mental, physical, and emotional. And he broke it down into every part of the body. And he also had this concept that things were either exocentric, going out, or concentric, going in. His work, you know, years later influenced, for example, modern dance. Ted Shawn wrote a book, Every Little Movement, based on Delsarte. And Delsarte's work was incredibly influential.
So these ideas inform your work. Is that how does it fit into your concept and your method, shall we say? Well,
in terms of authenticity, because of the way he developed these laws and these concepts. I mean, you know, forms are there to create a foundation. Of course, you get variations on your forms. It's like an improviser who's given you have to improvise, but you have to improvise within this parameter, within this box. What he was looking for were universal laws. And it's not the kind of thing you go out on stage and say, "Oh, now I'm going to extend my thumb," because it'd be antithetical to the creative process. And
yeah, some people have said that they'll start somewhat rigid, and these laws are kind of, I don't want to say fascist, but they're black and white. Do you feel that way, or do you take
absolutely not?
Yeah,
they're anything
so
but.
How do you feel about it?
I feel like if you don't employ the laws, you look like a phony.
So you do use the laws, but how do you adapt them to your own personal, observation and your own personal feelings?
Well, there's so many of them because the science that he developed was so complex and detailed. Things like the ninefold chord and the law of correspondence and all these things and how you apply them and how you use them are very important. Like if you're stuck, what should this character do at this moment? What is this next gesture? Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes, like especially with opera singers, they don't even know what to do with their hands. Mm-hmm. When they're singing, they're used to doing park and bark. Oh, and they're using their instrument. But they don't know how to use their body as well.
So you would say, we know that there are laws or are concepts or techniques or methods that mimes and physical theater artists, dancers, whoever does the physical arts employs. So you would say that this is one entrance into that world of
absolutely. It parallels
cause and effect of scientific. It is very scientific of how this makes this happen, and this happens because of this, right?
Yes. There's this is foundational work we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is like vocabulary. This is like the lexicon you have to have in order that opens up the floodgates to all kinds of other things. Once you understand the concepts, once you have imbibed the methodology and the thinking, you suddenly start finding its application everywhere. You see it in life all around you. Then you start, now you can start building a bank account of character types and things because you know where they're coming from and physically coming from.
How would you? We're speking about foundations, and so how would you define what you do? You draw
as a teacher or as a performer, or
well, you can both. Both. I mean, performer and teacher. How do you? I mean, I feel that a performer must teach it. That's part of the mission of being a performer is you hand down information to others, and you can do it.
Tony used to say, "I teach because it keeps me from being lazy."
Okay,
that's interesting.
But how would you define what you do? I mean, if I was somebody from another planet, what would you say that you do?
I'm showing you a metaphor for life.
And a metaphor is?
For cows.
What's that?
A meadow is for cows. I'll drink to that one too.
Yeah. Well, you're a poet. Just drink to that too. Yeah. So you're a poet.
So that's your Mime manifesto. It's the reason. What draws you to this art form is it because it is about life.
Yeah, it's a way to understand life, mm-hmm. and let people see themselves. Mm-hmm. And I mean that on the sort of epic level, on the the collective unconscious level.
Yeah. And here's something that just came to my mind. So, how does this reflect on your ethnicity in terms of being a Native American? How does this being seen? Is there a different importance there? Or
yes, there's a lot to be weighed in that process.
Yeah.
There's a lot on your shoulders. There's centuries, there's thousands of years on your shoulders in a way.
Uh-huh. And how long did it take you? We talked earlier about, the passage of time before one comes to an epiphany of so. Were you always aware of this weight, or is this something that's become heavier as you've gotten older, or now you've
I think
decided to deal with
it's one of the reasons I stayed away from doing something based on my heritage for so long.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
I think it was, first of all, you don't want to offend your people, your culture. Second of all, you want to elevate it. Third, you want to educate people about it.
Mhm.
And I wasn't ready to do all those things. And part of it is because I'm a walker between worlds. Part of it is because I was a fourth world kid growing up overseas.
Right,
and we would come to the reservation. Dad would take us around, the old ranch, and we would go to the powwows, and we would see our relatives, and then we'd go off and we'd go live in Africa or Iran or Tanzania or wherever we were assigned. And so there was a little bit of a disconnect, cultural disconnect. So I've had to grapple with that and bridge that. And that's one reason why I called the program Walker Between Worlds, is because that's what I am.
That's a great title. Yeah. Yeah, I can understand the complexity that you're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
Have you performed for Native American audiences?
I have, actually. Years ago on the Fort Hall Indian Reservation, I did some pantomime and a little magic. And it was a good time. It was fun. But I've never gone like to a powwow and done something, at the arena,
Do you feel that physical theater, or, I mean, it's interesting, a lot of world theater in general is more physical than the American traditional old dead white man theater, let's call it, So it's how do you see the future of maybe physical theater as one way for Native Americans to tell their stories? Is that something that has a lot of potential, or maybe it's always been done that the other cultures don't understand or have been exposed to,
Well, I mean, there are traditional things that are very mimetic in their source. I mean, you look at the hoop dancers, and they become butterflies, and they become, the world. They become, just using the shapes of the hoops and doing a constant movement. They're creating a whole story of creation. And it is mime. It is mime, and it's dance, and it's story, and it's manipulation, and it's all those things. So traditionally, that has always been part of the Native American culture. A tradition. One of the biggest traditions in Native America is creativity.
Yes. Yeah, and all sorts of art forms and visual arts as well.
Also survival. I mean, just going back, centuries, how people of the earth would have to survive. Just the creativity.
Opened up a huge door with that one.
Yes,
the creativity to even stay alive.
Yes. People aren't really aware of it. But in the Great Dying, when the Western world came to the Americas, 90% of the native population died.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can you imagine if 90% of the population died from the coronavirus today? What kind of impact that would have on the planet?
Yeah, and also a very short time. I mean, very short considering the scope of time. And it happened like that.
200 years ago, 250 years ago. Yeah,
it's incredible. So are you going in the future, will you be doing more work based on your Native American heritage, or did you?
Yes, that's the plan. I mean, I'll have a wide ranging repertoire of things, and depending on, I've been part of the new vaudeville movement and other things as well. So I've got comedy characters like Wally Wiggins, who works as a comic
Oh my
MC.
God, that is so funny. I saw a couple of clips of that, and he's such a wonderful character that you use him as like an MC, but he's just in himself. He's so funny. And he's
a wannabe. Yeah. He's a want-to-be magician. He's a wannabe entertainer, and he fails at everything. But
you have a favorite genre? A favorite, you've worked with storytelling and mime, and you put these in. And so, is there a, almost stand-up comedy in some ways, and illusion and magic? Do you have a kind of a persuasion toward one that you like more over the other, or one that you use more than the other of all these moving parts?
Well, I talked earlier, about having periods where I was dry for concepts or ideas, or what I could do next. And about 4 years ago, it came to the point where I realized I have so many ideas and so many things I want to do. I'm not going to be able to achieve them all in this lifetime.
How does one deal with that? I have the same
great
problem.
place to be, I think.
How does one solve that though? I have the same problem. In fact, as one gets older, sometimes you're more satisfied with just thinking about the project rather than acting on it. Because time is short. Like, how does one? Do you lift weights? Do you eat more healthy? How does one solve that problem to have more energy? Or is it way life goes?
Well, I think yes, it's the way life goes, but also I think part of it is that's also why we teach, right? Is to pass on some of these things to other people. Sometimes our physical abilities, are going to fail us. I've had oh wow, both knees actually replaced. That was my knee going right there.
Oh dear.
No, it wasn't.
Your chair. I think it was your chair.
But I have two titanium knees here. Yet it took me forever to get back to being able to move and do some of the most basic vocabulary when it comes to movement.
By the way, you have a green stool. I have a red stool. So.
Mine disappears on the green screen.
Yeah.
Let's talk about cinema. Yeah, go ahead, Karen. I wanted this is a good segue into the mind brain and the cinema brain that you could talk about.
Exactly, because you are a prolific filmmaker. You've got a degree in film. You've created this wonderful biography of Tony and the I've forgotten the name of the Cats piece.
The King of Cats. Yeah.
King of Cats, which I highly recommend. They sound so wonderful. Yeah. What's the connection that you see between film and mime? James and I, in James's teaching, we've been talking about how a mime can actually use film techniques, like we're using the way we focus our movement makes it become a close-up or a tracking shot.
We do it all the time, don't we?
Slow motion.
And the world of mime, borrows from the world of film.
Mm-hmm.
Once film became a reality, we began to imitate the world of film. We can now do jump cuts, and we can do flashbacks, and we can do time compression. I know that like Tony, he had this wonderful sketch, Golf, and at one point, he grabs the bag in Golf, and he's walking like this. And in that one gesture, you realize that he's been walking for a mile.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's whether it's the film brain, the animation brain, the mind brain, it's all one in some ways. Just the tools are very different. That's my feeling about it.
So when did you?
Yeah, it is a different medium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that means it's the tools. Yeah, the medium's different, but the concepts are really similar.
Yeah, I mean, the Delsart laws still work the same, right? The Delsart laws work the same, when you want to be passionate, and you want to be intimate, you get passionate, you get close to the lens.
Mm-hmm. Where does acting come into all this? My feeling is that if a mime or clown is not a good actor, you're not going to be a good mime or clown. What's your feeling?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. People move, and they're vacuous with their movement. Who don't understand how to use the acting skills of having a premise, of creating internal atmosphere. And that also throws back to Delsart, who said, it's the thought and the feeling first, then it's the gesture, and finally come the words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It also goes back to the thing that we were talking about earlier, like creating this, invisible wall that's in front of us. And that's an illusion that has become, like James said earlier, sort of a cliche. And it's because it doesn't have, if it's not performed with the reason or the acting or
right.
the
and it usually happens on your way to something else that you're doing. It isn't the wall.
Right.
That's right. You're right.
Yeah.
That's right.
You're going here, and you have to get around this, and then it's almost like people forget that it's not the technique, it's the intent.
That's an excellent way to describe it. It's used on the way to navigate through an environment, not an act in itself. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So as we progress as artists, we start to learn that the inside part, the reasons and the story it's not the outside showing of a technique, it's the internal
right.
part.
And the training that I give came from Tony. And what Tony always talked about from the beginning of my training until his dying breath, whenever we'd work together, was all about, your premise and your atmosphere first. Even if you're doing yoga, you're not just going through the moves of the sun salutation. Something moves you. You're moved by something. Something, if you imagine some light in your chest that's pushing up and forward in you, and you can visualize it and feel it, and then it becomes part of your gesture. That's different than just doing the move.
And tell me, who do you think Tony was influenced by? And my feeling is everything is derivative of something else. Like, what were some of his influences, do you feel?
Well, Tony, of course, had studied with Marceau. He studied with Descroux, but he also studied with Louise Gifford at Columbia University. And at the time, Louise was one of the top pantomime experts in the world teaching at Columbia. And she, this is a wonderful story about Louise and Tony.
What's Louise's last name?
Gifford.
Louise's?
Gifford.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, her name popped up. I was looking at a copy of the Amateur Magician's Handbook, and she wrote a whole chapter, introduction, preface on pantomime for the magician in that book.
Makes sense.
Very interesting. And
so you were going to
Tony
tell
was
us
an urban guy too, right?
New Jersey, New York. He
lived
he grew up in Paulsboro, New Jersey, just south of New York. Italian, Italian. His mama was so Italian, it was unbelievable. She had this little restaurant in Paulsboro.
Can you checkered tablecloths?
Can you tell us a little bit?
She was a classic, man.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Louise Gifford? Because I don't think people.
Yeah. So Louise was teaching mime and pantomime. At that time, Tony was a college student and very ebullient and very kind of an over the top kind of a guy. And so she just she said, "Oh, he's one of those," and he went into the library and he found these books on Delsarte at Columbia. And he knocks on her door and he says, "Miss Gifford, I found these books on Delsarte." And she goes, "You discovered Delsarte? Oh, I misjudged you. Come in." And she had, this library of all these Delsarte works, and she opened them all up to him. And I guess years later, Tony, this is what Tony told me anyway, he was studying with Descroux in Paris, and he goes into Descroux' office, and there's a copy of the oratory on Descroux' table. And he goes back later, it was gone. So then he goes in to talk to Descroux again. He goes, "Mr. Descroux, can you tell me about Delsarte?" And Delsarte goes, "No." But there are so many, if you look at Descroux' vocabulary and you look at the vocabulary of Delsarte, they're like very, very parallel sorts of approaches to movement.
Sure.
And yet I think people are probably more familiar with Descroux than Delsarte.
I'm sure.
Well, different time, different historical time.
Right.
Yeah, completely different historical time. And that's one of the problems with Delsarte, is that it was, it's couched in this 18th century language. So it's very hard to plow through it and find what the meaning is. And when you do, it's like really enlightening. For example, there's Genevieve Stebbins, she talks about the cube. And I was going to talk about this earlier. It's like when a character doesn't know what gesture to make, the cube is one way to solve that issue.
What is that?
So if you imagine a cube in front of you,
Uh-huh.
right? Got this cube, and so here you reject it, right? Here you support it. Here you contain it. Here you bless it or suppress it, and here you contain it. You hold it, right?
Ah,
So you just envision a cube, and you know what the next gesture should be. And then, of course, you have to imbue it with your atmosphere, your character, your premise, and all those things.
So Leland, you've toured many different places. Do you have any disaster stories that from your touring experience? Some interesting event that happened to you, among others, that you can share.
Well, I got
time.
I got lots of those, but which one should I draw upon? I think my favorite, one of my favorite ones early on at Mime Walk in Kansas City. Branch Worsham and Michael Troutman. Mike's a wonderful clown and a mime, and Branch is a mime. He lives in Europe, but we all started out with a little theater company in Kansas City. After I'd been studying with Tony, I was going to the University of Missouri in Kansas City in the theater department there, and I saw a little thing in the paper, mime studio starting, show up on this time, in one of the rags. And I go, and there's like 3 other people, and it was like this guy Steve and Branch and Mike, and I'd never seen these guys before. And so we all worked together for years at Mime Walk, and it went on for many, many years, that company, even after I had left. One day we were doing an April Fool's show, and we had devised this clown sketch. It was a fire-eating sketch. I had worked in the circus, and I'd learned how to eat fire and how to blow fire. And so we were doing a restaurant scene, but we were poor. We didn't even have a table. So we took one of those sonotubes, these tubes they use for casting concrete, hollow tube. We put a board on it. Now we had a table, cheap checkered tablecloth, cafe. Great. Sit down, and I'm the customer, and Steve walks in with this tray.
Are we talking about a mime tray or
an actual tray?
Actual tray.
An actual tray. Well, it wasn't a tray. It was like what do you call it? A chafing dish.
Yeah.
That's on fire, right? He walks out like with a flambe like this and sets it on the table like this. But when he does, it unbalances the table, and there is a glass full of lighter fluid like this, and it tips over, and the whole table goes, and I've got a tower of flame now, higher than my head.
And the audience applauded. They thought it was part of the act, right?
They don't know. They have no clue. They don't know.
Oh my gosh.
And plus I can't believe I'm saying this now, but we were very sang-froid about the whole thing. Right? It was like, we didn't, we're not going to change character. and I look up at Steve, and this flame's going here, and I see his hand is on fire, and he looks at his hand. He has white gloves on. Thank God. He's got these gloves on, and flames are coming off these gloves, and he goes, and he exits. And I'm left here with a table. I don't know what the hell to do. I pick the tabletop up, and I walk off stage and set it down. And it's off stage. I put it on this metal cart, and my friend Mike's back there. I go, put it out. Because I realize I must finish the sketch. What? Anyway, I go back out. Steve comes out, the waiter. To this day, I have no idea what we were doing out there. It was just a single downlight, and I have no idea what we were doing to this day. I can't remember. But we were doing something, having some kind of interaction. And I see Troutman off stage, and he's looking in horror, right, at this flame, and he grabs this jacket, and he tries to put out the flame of the jacket, but it's a nylon jacket. It gets covered with the lighter fluid too, and it's on fire. And so I'm catching this out of the corner of my eye, and finally I see, he's got a fire extinguisher. He puts it out, and I look off stage with a little smile, you know, and I'll never forget the look he gave me. He goes, and he takes the fire extinguisher and he shoots it from off stage left, and this cloud comes and covers us. And we're in this downlight, it just covers us. And then it goes into the audience, and the audience is all going, we open the doors to this little studio theater. Everybody traipses out. Everybody's outside now. And then we come out, and they give us a round of applause as we walk out. And that was our April Fool's show. So.
Oh, Leland, I don't think anybody's disaster story can top that one. That's great.
Moving ahead, now let's talk about those titanium knees. Like, how does one, as an aging physical theater artist, cope with that? How does one evolve into the present, given the long years of wear and tear on the body? Like, yeah, well, we're all, and a lot of that. Yeah, how do you adapt? What happens there?
Well, look what I'm doing. Walker Between Worlds. That's an adaptation. I'm still using the physical techniques, but I'm backing it up with storytelling and also there'll be some more media and some shadow play eventually in that program. And you know, I intend to keep going on as long as I can crawl. As long as I can still create something, because if you're an artist, you have to. Creating is what keeps you sane, especially in this insanity that we're surrounded with.
Sane and healthy. It keeps you healthy too.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I could have handled, you know, my wife's stroke, plus the pandemic, plus all of these things without the creating occurring. It's the only thing really that's kept me positive, moving forward and feeling like there's the next moment. And so there'll always, I used to think, well, if I was blind, would I still be able to do mime? And then one day I did a mime workshop for blind students. And here they are, you know, doing isolations and learning how to move their bodies, and they're blind, but they had more consciousness than most of my sighted students about where their body was in space. So there's always some avenue for you to create if you're a creative artist. One thing I've never understood is how someone can do just one thing and do it forever because it got a reaction, and then now it's in cement. You know, and then the next thing, now that's in cement.
Yeah, the saying, you know, the only thing that remains the same is change. You know, everything changes, so we have to respond to that. You know,
and we have to constantly reinvent ourselves in the theater. I mean, that's the actor's thing, right? We have to be willing to become other people, other things, constantly.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I was just so fascinated with your work, because you have so many variations in the types of technique, and I specifically want to mention your shadowgraph program, which is fascinating to me. Your ability to create those beautiful shadows so quickly and so precisely. But then the other part of it that I just really loved watching the video was when you would move away from the shadow screen, your movements there that transitioned into the appearance. So there was like this you're sort of off stage, but it's so beautiful and so exquisite.
Would you say, Leland, that the training for the hand movements is using the mime techniques as the core? Are there special movements that you need to do to articulate the hand images?
Of course, it's mime.
Yeah.
It is, you know, if you're doing like a deer, you know, the deer looks back, the eye moves. You know?
Yeah. How long does it take for one
that's beautiful.
to how long does it take for one to master one of these shadow forms?
I'm still creating them.
Yeah.
So I'm making new ones as we speak.
Do you sit in front of a light with a wall or beyond? And
yes, I do.
How do you explore? What a great exercise for people with arthritis, I would think, or people with joints that are getting stiff. It seems
Absolutely.
like this would be a whole new genre of
a whole new
exercise
thing. This is
for baby boomers. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Wow.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Oh my gosh.
And you're
look at that.
You're still developing the images, I take it, correct?
Absolutely. Here's some Native American images for you.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh. Fantastic.
There's always something fresh that you can create. I mean, Palabolis did it with a whole ensemble. I did it with a whole ensemble. I created a whole piece with ensemble called Shadow Play with my friend David Leong. It's part of a university residency over a period of a year with 10 students. And it was an all shadow-based journey.
Beautiful.
The way I came about learning to do it, Tony would let me start. I had a little hoop screen, and Tony would let me come out in front of the audience and do it as part of the pre-show warm-up. And so I wasn't very good when I first started. And I would add like one little piece here, one little bit there. So it grew very organically. And so then eventually I came up with sort of like I would compare it to a kata, like a martial arts kata, where I can go from form to form to form to form. Yeah. But I also inform the movement, like I was saying with the premise and atmosphere. So I'm making all the sounds for the animals, for example. I become them, they become me. It's more like shadow catching, catching and becoming it, trying to be a shapeshifter and becoming the creature and the animal. So it's in your body as well. If you're a swan, there's certain things that.
How do you feel about
beautiful.
legacy?
That is beautiful.
What about legacy? We're talking about the mature artist and these forms. Do you have any sense about your legacy or what that means, or is it important, not important? What do you think about that?
Well, my personal legacy, I don't. It's tiny, compared to the legacy of like Tony and the amount of people that he touched and the careers that he transformed.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. I think most artists have a legacy, but I'm just saying, is that something that you want to promote, or that's something that happens naturally? What's your philosophy on this sense of?
Well, I'm not seeking it, if that's what you mean. No, I'm not seeking it, but I'd like to inform people as much as possible about the things that I've discovered and the things that I know.
Yeah.
And I want to pass that on. And that's one reason why I do teach. Also, the other wonderful thing, teaching is a very special thing. It can either create someone or it can destroy someone.
True.
I always think back to my high school days. I was sick for a week, and I would go, and I was always struggling with algebra anyway. But that week of being sick, and when I came back and I tried to catch up with the homework and all that, it was impossible for me. And I got a D. And so my father enrolled me in algebra summer school at the university. So I had to make up for my poor grades that summer, which was horrible. But I went into the algebra class, and there was the teacher, and then there was the teaching assistant. And so the teaching assistant was learning how to teach. And so he gave us this equation that we had to solve, and he showed us how to solve it. Okay. And we were supposed to come back the next day and show that we could do it. So I went home and I looked at this thing and I went, I didn't know where to begin. So I asked my dad, and my dad came in and he goes, "Oh, okay, look, you go blah, 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 and then you like it, and just like this, like that. See, do you understand?" I go, yeah. So it's great. So the next day, he says, "Who wants to show us here on the blackboard how to do this equation?" And I go, "I do." I'm so full of myself. I get up there and I lay out the equation, and he gets up and goes, "That's not what I taught you."
Mm.
I was crushed. Sit down. And then the master teacher came in and she goes, "Look, he got the equation right. It's and so I had to explain, well, my dad taught me how to do it, blah, 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 blah. But it scarred me, that event.
Yeah. We all have stories like that. What
Yeah,
advice would you give
But
to
it
young?
made you be a better teacher because you could see.
Well, let me explain something to you.
Okay.
I'm not quite done.
Okay.
So in my 30s, I went to Brooks Institute to get my degree in motion picture studies.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we had to have, of course, was a math requirement, because there was a lot of things with lenses and chemistry, et cetera, et cetera.
Uh-huh.
So the requirement was trigonometry. And as soon as I saw that, all of those feelings came rushing back. Math phobia, right? And so I see the math teacher, and a young guy, I call him over, and I say, "I just want you to know, I'm going to do my best in your class, but I have a little math phobia." He goes, "Oh, don't worry about it. Happens all the time, especially with older students." I said, "Really?" He says, yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine. I helped design the SATs." That did not fill me with a lot of confidence for some reason. Anyway, we're in his class. We're going along a couple of weeks in, and I walk up to his desk and I say, we've been working at stuff, and I say, "So I just want to know when the other shoe's going to drop, when we actually start doing the real trigonometry, the real trig." He goes, "What do you think you've been doing?" Well, the guy had made it so clear and so simple to understand, with such clarity and ease, that it wasn't this insurmountable piece of labor. It was something I could do. Mm-hmm. And so he healed me. It was like he laid his hands on me. "Be healed. You no longer have math phobia." It was astounding. And that's the difference between a great teacher and a bad teacher. One can scar you, yes, and the other one can elevate you.
I have a question.
That is a part of your legacy, then, is to have that relationship with your students that you can.
Yes. For example, when we have critiques, we don't have critiques. First, we do mirrors, where you say just what you saw without any opinion. Mm-hmm. Right? And then we have gift giving, where you give people gifts, where you elevate what they do.
Nice.
Well, I have a two-part question. One is along this lines. What advice would you give a young person wanting to enter physical theater? Where should they go? And how do you see conquering the challenges that confront the stereotypes of physical theater in our American culture by and large? How does a kid get the excitement, the enthusiasm, and where does he or she receive that to go forward? And then what should the role of the physical artist be in going forward in our culture to defeat some of these, bad jokes that we've all heard,
Right. Well, there were a lot more opportunities prior to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. In Europe, things are much different than they are here when it comes to physical theater and the approaches to physical theater. It's kind of a narrow offering in general in the States. Even Celebration Barn, I don't think that they're offering one workshop on mime.
Oh.
you know.
And why is that, do you think? I mean, what is that, the residue from all how should we say it, the unprepared performers of the last 20, 25, 30 years?
I don't
I mean,
know. There's a big influence of clown theater and vaudeville. There isn't so much emphasis these days on the groundwork and on the foundational work.
True. So do you feel clown and mime are almost the same, and maybe this foundation, like to me, a good clown needs to be a good mime and a good actor. I mean, if you're not a good mime or a good actor, how can you be a clown? I mean,
Exactly.
Like the mime artist at the foundation of so many of these physical theater forms. And how does one get that message across in today's United States? You know.
I know. My friend Charlie Fry, he's an incredible world-class juggler and an incredible magician, sleight of hand artist, and he's an incredible mime. I hate the guy. He's too damn talented. He's like a bottomless well of skills. But he started out at the Ringling Brothers Clown College,
right?
And he learned a lot of his technique there. But the most important lesson he got was from George Carl, who became his mentor. If you know who George Carl is, he was a very, very physical comedian juggler, and hilarious. But he took one look at Charlie and Charlie's act, and he goes, "Get rid of that makeup and costume." And as soon as he did, the world opened up to him.
So you're talking about going back to the source to the metaphor for life and the humanness, the humanity in people is the secret, and not all these tricks.
It's the premise, right?
Bells and flashy colors. That one would smoke and mirrors. We don't need
just because you have a striped shirt and a white face doesn't make you a mime.
Yeah, we don't want smoke and mirrors. We want you, like as you were talking earlier an hour ago. We want you. We want what stories you can tell from your past or from your experience, and
Well, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Keith Johnstone, who I also really respect a lot. He's a master of improvisation and improvisational approach. He said, the audience is just waiting for the actor to transform.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hold that to heart. It's really true. They're waiting to see the transformation occur, and that's what a play is about. That's what a sketch is about. That's what everything is about. It's this journey, whether it's the fool or the hero, that we want to see at the end how they have transformed.
And what pure form of that is the mime in the space, just a human body transforming into a magical world. I mean, that's it's a wizard, it's a sorcerer, it's a magic person that can do that. That's my feeling.
I think we all feel this amazing respect for that art form and that ability to transform, and look forward to seeing more people study mime and perform mime.
So where do people go? We're almost at the end here. Where do, the question was, where can a young person, where do they go? What's the step that they take? In a
well, Celebration Barn is still offering workshops. Celebration Barn offers workshops every summer.
Does one go on the internet? I mean, what would be the tools that a younger person would want to do you go on the internet? Do you travel the world? Do you see as many performances as you can? What would be your recommendation for the young artist?
I would say, it's everything is a personal journey, and if you can find a person, find a real human being to mentor you and guide you, who's willing to take the time to do the one-on-one guidance. That's what I got from Tony. Tony took me under his wing. Tony made me his apprentice. I got to learn side by side with him, working with him on stage. I imbibed things non-verbally from that experience. I imbibed things spiritually from that experience that, you know, that echo in my soul all the time. And that's how you really learn, you know, is that way.
Which is an ageless process, you know, the magic person on the mountaintop or in the jungle that you have to search for. Once you find that person and have that one-on-one communication, that's the key, correct?
Yeah.
Master apprentice, you know, it's an old methodology, but it is maybe the most meaningful way. You know, my magic mentor, Tony was my mentor in mime, but in the world of magic, when I was 10 years old, I saw this magician, John Calvert, who used a buzzsaw to cut off somebody's head and did this very romantic sort of dashing leading man character, had this incredible voice. He was a Hollywood actor for real. And when I was a little boy, you know, I saw the poster on a pillar in downtown Dar es Salaam, and went, Dad, can we see him? He's an American. You know, it was such a novelty. And so we went to this little. It was a movie theater that has stage like the old vaudeville times, right? In Africa, and they had this stage, and he had obviously self-promoted the whole show, but he was amazing at how he did his self-promotion. You know, he for example was blindfolded, and he'd drive a car through a crowd while blindfolded, and
that's a good one.
And so he'd make the newspaper headlines. He knew how to do publicity stunts and that sort of thing. I like that. He came into the harbor with his own yacht that he and his brother had built. They brought all the way from the States, you know, over the Indian Ocean and blah blah blah. And he had two big cats on board at the time.
Wow.
And it was such a romantic thing. What a romantic picture that he built, and he knew what he was doing the whole time. Wow. And so when I saw him as a young boy at 10, it was like, you know, he's a god. And when he cut off the buzzsaw, he cut off the head, he threw it into my mother's lap. You know, my mother threw it back. I mean, he did this as it was horror, but it was also comedy. It was like he was doing sort of like a mad doctor, like a B-movie horror character. Anyway, so years later, I mean, by this time I've had a full career and been touring and performing maybe for 20 years or something. And I walk into my friend Ray Goulet's little magic shop. He had a little magic museum in the outskirts of Boston. And he says, "Hey, kid, so who's the first magician you ever saw?" He had this very gruff voice. I went, "Oh, there's this guy, John Calvert. I saw him when I was a little boy in Africa." Told him the whole story. He goes, "Yeah? Really? Of course." Well, John's a friend of mine. I've been on that yacht. We're having a dinner for him next week. Do you want to go? Come on, this is 40 years later. Wow. Of course, I said yes. I had gigs. I canceled them. And so I go to this performance, and it's a whole bunch of magicians in a hotel, in one of those little hotel, you know, sort of ballroom things. And then I realize, when I was 10 years old, he must have been in his 40s. It says 40, maybe he's probably 90 or something, I said to myself. 90. This isn't going to be good. So I sit down and ready to be disappointed, right? And when he walks out, his charisma was there. He had that, you know, that 40s movie star quality about him. He had that voice. He was still completely there. He did the blindfold act where people are holding things up behind him and he's telling them what they're holding up, etc. He did his sort of debonair cigarette act with the thing of "don't smoke." and then they have a little intermission. And after the intermission, they start again, and Tammy comes running out, his wife, and she goes, "There he is, John," and she points at me. And John Calvert comes out and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, you see that young man right there? He saw me when he was 10 years old in Africa. You see, all those stories are true." And after that, we became tight friends. He invited me to Las Vegas. I performed with him side by side. because I told him, that one of the most indelible memories of my childhood was his buzzsaw act. He invited me to assist him in the buzzsaw act as one of the nurses, right? And so I did, and performed with him in some other venues. And on his 100th birthday, I was invited to New York, and I had bought, his brother had made for me a duplicate of his buzzsaw out of aircraft aluminum. His brother was an aircraft engineer. He made me a duplicate of this illusion, and I performed it for John that night on his 100th birthday. And I copied almost every inflection and everything in his script and all of his movements as closely as I could. And it was an amazing night. And that's that mentorship. That was that, he gave me the on-the-job training that I needed to fulfill a childhood dream. So,
what a
Karen.
wonderful story. Thank you, Leland. That was amazing.
Karen, ask him the last question. One of those.
Yes. Leland, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I don't know if I'm ever going to grow up. I'm the ultimate in Peter Pan syndrome.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I want to be the very best at what I'm doing right now. I want to just do it the very best I can.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Leland, thank you so much. There's been such a wealth of ideas and concepts and information that you've offered us in the last hour and a half, and we really appreciate you doing this. And
what a great conversation. Thank you so much, Leland, for joining us.
It's been a real honor, you guys, and I really appreciate what you're doing to keep the art of mime in the public eye and in the hearts of everybody, and also to the field of mimes. It's important. So thank you.
That's Mime Radio, ladies and gentlemen, and others. We're all a community of humans, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Mime Radio Show podcast. Please join us in 2 weeks for an interview with Joan Merwin. Be sure to like and subscribe.